Yeah. So really just thinking about this, being in this eclipse energy, it's so interesting that this 33rd verse is called the Aramonic Deception. You know, we talked in our first gathering about this tool of using the calendar of the soul. And there are 4 times of year that these sort of obstacles come in, these forces of hindrance come in, you know, at these turning points. And we are at this turning point now where we continue to head into the dark of the year. And so we have this verse that makes us wake up and grapple with ourselves and with the world. So I'm wondering if there would be somebody who would like to unmute themselves and read that for us today.
I'll read it, Hazel.
Thank you.
I feel at last the world's reality, which lacking the communion of my soul, would in itself be frosty, empty life, and showing itself powerless to recreate itself in souls, would in itself find only death.
Thank you. Yeah. So we have to do some work. We're always being called to work, aren't we? Yeah, we have to bring the communion of our soul. Otherwise, it's only death. And death is our subject these days. We have been grappling with this because it is part of life. And it really helps to bring out those qualities of the light to us when we can look at the polar opposite. So I thought before we get into this, I have this whole plan to bring in some work that I've been doing for many years now around this journey, this planetary journey that the soul takes between death and new birth. But before we do that, I thought maybe we could check in just a little bit and see how people have been doing this last week with their meditation with their tree. And perhaps you've been reading to your beloved dead. And maybe some folks might want to share a few impressions from that before we get into the deep work.
Well, I feel this time of year, this particular week, it's so interesting, Hazel, you mentioned that this is the Aramonic verse time, because, I always find this week in November is a real transition into what I call sort of like the preparation before Advent, right? Where I start to see the glimmers of the light, but this part of November is very dark. Always is very dark for me, and I know because my birthday is at this time, so it always seems to me that there's a real sense of darkness at this time in this week. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're in the groove. You're feeling it. There's no use trying to avoid it. It's important to embrace. Elizabeth, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I don't know, I was born this time of year too, but I'm having a beautiful time right now. I'm in a time of transition, and I moved to stay with my son. My husband and I moved to stay with my son and his wife in South Carolina. And he happens to live across from this magnificent river and woods and hiking trails. And the light here is so spectacular. And to go out in any time of the day, the morning light is different than the afternoon light. But to experience nature as the light is changing so much is so connecting us with the world, with this bringing the spirit into the physical. And but one thing I noticed since I re-signed up for the Chrysalis Group and having the opportunity to come to these different classes, what I've discovered is that it helps to lessen my egotism. What I just discovered, as what you were saying just a few moments ago, it was like an aha moment. It was, if there's no community, then egotism grows in a skewed way, because true community means lessening the ego, the egotism, and giving strength to the higher I. And when we collectively share who we are as spiritual beings in this human body, we can spiritualize it with the right type of thoughts, and we can soften our egotism and bring us more balance. So I find that the contrasts can be brought into balance. And so light is so important, but it's a great time for reflection. Thank you.
True, exactly. Right. And that's what the moon gives us too. It reflects that sunlight. And when we have these cosmic earthly events, these eclipses and such, it gives us an opportunity to do our own reflecting, to bring our own light forces out and shine those out. And so, yeah, it's practice for us to become little suns in the world. Anyone else have anything to share from the week before we go on with our program?
I want to second what Elizabeth said. It's to say it's my birthday time this week, and it's always a time for me to reflect. But I've had really beautiful experiences this week, just being out in nature and seeing the change. And I went for a really early morning walk this morning, and the sky was just, I don't have enough words to describe it. It was just a short moment of red, and it was a most amazing sunrise. I wished I could share it better. So, yeah.
What a blessing. Yeah, you're holding it within you and it's glowing out of you, which is a blessing to us. So thank you. Sandra.
Yeah, this is my mother was born on November the 13th, Friday, November the 13th, which she said was her lucky day. And so that was Saturday. So I've been, kind of having an awareness of her. She passed across the threshold in 2009. And so it's been a while, but I read to her for a whole year across the threshold. And yeah, she had many, many gifts to offer. And I see lots, similarities with her qualities and some of the things my son, who is a musician and has a really developed sense of the aesthetic, has to bring. And so in this life, I'm feeling a little bit like being a mother to people who don't have mothers and being a daughter to people who don't have daughters. So I took my friend who's 20 years older than I am, but never had any children. I took her out of the retirement home with her friend, and we went to lunch. And it was like creating a community that's not on blood, but really more on consciousness, so that, and being a Waldorf teacher this time of year, I recognize that darkness is coming, but we were always engaged in making lanterns and telling stories about George and bringing the sun into the flame. And, so I guess I have and I do experience darkness, even the void, sort of like a black hole that has a super, like a event horizon around it, that you can see where the black hole is because of the event horizon. And then in the center, there's nothing, but it's surrounded by light, the photons that didn't get pulled in. So that's kind of, and with us in consciousness, I feel like to look through that darkness and find the light inside is sort of an inner planetary, an inner cosmic light to match that sort of light in the darkness in the cosmos. That's all.
Oh, that's plenty. That's a lot. Thank you. What a beautiful offering. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I guess we'll have Kathy will be our last one for this this, but when we do go on, I'm going to encourage you to chime in at any time. So, Kathy.
Yeah, I can be quick. I just I find that I'm so grateful for the kind of the reminder to remember all those loved ones who have crossed the threshold. And I feel like I can concentrate my connection at this time of year. And with life, things seem to fade at other times of the year. So I'm so grateful to have that renewal of my connection with them. And then I'd also say that in one of my groups, I'm working on positivity. And when you have the negative or the dark, it's nice. I feel like I have a polished sword or something to meet that with. And I don't want to say bring it on, but but it comes on. It comes on, you know, and it's just nice to feel like I have tools, not all the time, but often too. And it's through the work with all of you. So thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, we're always given opportunities, aren't we? It's what we do with them that makes the difference. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for warming the space here with your experiences and your insights and thoughts. And I really felt called to bring a practice that I often bring to various communities at this time of year. As a matter of fact, my phone gave me a little reminder that 2 years ago today, I was with my friend Angela Foster, and we were on the Southern tour. You know, we brought this material of working with the dead as part of those workshops. And it's a practical guide for the life between death and rebirth. It's this universal journey across the threshold that we have all taken many times before, and we will take again and again. And while we're doing this, it's kind of going to be a truncated version of it, but I'm going to be giving some tones and some gestures for eurythmy. So I invite you, if you like, to stand up and participate in those with me. Just, if we had a eurythmist, we would really get into this, but, just to get a little flavor of these planetary gestures. So I invite you to do that. And I also invite you to dedicate this imagination to someone, maybe somebody that's crossed the threshold that, you want to connect with. Or perhaps you will use this or you can do that and also take it in as a chance to do your own inner work around these themes. So, yeah, we all begin the journey the same, don't we? We cross the threshold. And Rudolf Steiner talks about these tones that vibrate for the human being. And so he says that there's this experience of crossing the threshold, of experience the tone of the earth, which he describes as being the sound of the tone D. Does that come across on the Zoom? Could you hear that? So this is the tone of the earth in its present incarnation right now. And it used to be different, because nothing ever stays the same. We're always changing, growing. It used to be in the key of C, which corresponds to Mars. But now we're in the Mercury phase of Earth. So I ask you to just inwardly vibrate in this key of D and imagine shuffling off your mortal coil, leaving first the physical body. And so maybe you can picture someone that who has died and that's the process that they've gone through, or in your past lives, you let go of that and that goes back to the earth. And then after over 3 days, the formative forces of our etheric body start to dissolve. Unless, of course, you're a saint or a great initiate. And those sheaths actually stay in the etheric body of the earth. But that's a whole nother program that we could go into, which is really quite interesting. And so now we start to really imagine this space between the earth and the moon. So this is the realm in which the human being released from the physical body dwells during what is called in Hindu terminology, Kamaloka. So maybe if you're Catholic, you might have heard of this as the state of purgatory. Right? So can you imagine yourself or your loved one expanding? You know, here we are, we're stuck in these little earthly bodies, but we're these amazing spirits. And when we're released from the body, we expand more and more and more, all the way up to the moon sphere. And as we're expanding, we see the panorama of our life in a backward review. So we can think of it as, I always think of it as, from that Parsifal myth, this idea of time becoming space. We're released from time into this eternal realm and become part of this bigger realm of space. So in Kamaloka, this is the region of the burning desires, right? We meet our earthly longings. We enter the fires of purification and experience, you know, what we've done to others from their point of view. So we're continuing to expand until we're as large as the orbit of the moon, and we're doing this work. And Steiner tells us that this phase lasts about 1/3 of our lives. So if we're 75 when we die, we're spending 25 years in Kamaloka. That's interesting, isn't it? And he also says that that's the measure of time that we spend sleeping. So now, during this phase, all that we experienced in the spiritual world while we slept, that gets revealed to us as well. Right? So interesting. So when we think about that, probably most of the people that we know who have died are in this phase in their journey. And this is when they need us the most. This is when they're closest to the earth. This is when they can really, they're still, you know, burning with the desires of their earthly longings and working through all that stuff. That's when they need our healing prayers, and they can really receive our readings to them. Yeah. So then we reach this moon sphere, and that has the tone of B. And if you want to do this eurythmy gesture, the eurythmy gesture for the moon is moon. And of course, this is the other gesture. So when we reach this first of the 7 spheres, we're greeted by what Steiner calls the Primal Teachers. Right? He describes them as being the registrars of our destiny. I love that. So these wise beings, they never came into physical incarnation. Their destiny brought them, they followed the moon when it separated from the earth, and he describes it as making this fortress there on the moon, where they inspire from there the initiates and those who work with them, incorporating into them their wisdom. So when we meet them in this first station in the afterlife, they're helping us to unravel our karma. And when we've learned to release our passions and longings, then we can expand on. So this sphere can be longer or shorter depending on the person, right? And we have to remember that we're not going to be able to purify everything all at once, right? We're human beings, we're working through things. So what isn't purified has to remain behind, because we're ascending into these higher levels that have these higher vibrations. So we have to leave, our baggage behind, so that's the only way that we can expand on. And then we're going to retrieve this baggage on our way back into incarnation. And this becomes the focus of our work in our next life. So we don't get rid of it. It gets recycled, right? And then beyond the moon, we continue to look back to the earth, unfolding what is already developed in our relationships. And it's during this experience that we bring about the impulse to act differently in our next incarnation. So this is how we create the will for karmic compensation, right? This is how we learn. Steiner describes the human being as, quote, like a cloud woven out of spirit. And then we enter the Mercury sphere. So again, that's D, just like the earth. And the gesture is Steiner says, a person who has developed qualities of compassion and clear thinking, qualities that are usually termed moral, lives gracefully into Mercury, and we are lit up by spiritual beings. It's quite a picture. It's almost like that image that we're thinking of that you brought for us of the sunset or sunrise that you were describing earlier, right? We become lit up with these spiritual beings. And so we can ask ourselves now, friends, what would it be like in our life now on Earth to develop these gifts of Mercury, right? How can we cultivate compassion as a practice of moral thinking now? That's going to make our work over there a little bit easier. And again, we can't assimilate, whatever we can assimilate, we leave behind. And that way we can expand on to the next sphere of Venus. And that's the tone of F. And Eurythmy gesture. Of course, the ah can be from the heart too. But we could give it to the earth. That's the Venus gesture. And here again, the human being is strongly influenced by the kind of person they were in life. So in Venus, we're contemplating our spiritual inclinations. And Steiner says, quote, people who have not been able to develop any religious feeling or spiritual experience are isolated. They cannot attract the forces needed from the loving sphere of Venus, which means that in their next incarnation, they will have an astral body that in a certain respect is imperfect. So here, friends, this is how we see how karma takes shape. So can we work to develop tolerance and interest and love while we're here on Earth? And this is followed by the human being expanding up to the sun. This is a threshold experience. The tone is A. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, this is a real turning point where we move from the lower to the higher planets. This is a real gateway, the sun. And in this phase between death and rebirth, we're turned inside out. That's sort of the Leo gesture in Eurythmy. And, to really become fully penetrated by the energies here, Steiner talks about how it is essential to open and receive these more refined influences of the sun spirits, right? He talks about them as the second hierarchy. And so we can ask ourselves, have I contemplated the countenance of Michael, that cosmopolitan sun being who stands as our current time spirit? Are we able to see ourselves as a universal human being beyond nationality? The idea that the sun shines on everybody equally, right? And above all, it is essential to know the ruling sun spirit, the cosmic Christos. So, if you've explored the mystery of death and resurrection while living on earth, you will be able to receive very high vibrations in this most important phase in the afterlife. So we move on to, now we're going to the upper planets. And it's a little harder to talk about these. Actually, Steiner's indications become less and less. It's harder to put things into words. And so here we have the tone of C. Let's do the lower one. And the gesture is eh, eh. So here in Mars, Steiner describes that we are no longer separate. We become so deeply interpenetrated with the other spiritual beings in what he describes as cosmic speech. So we become part of this cosmic conversation. We are one with the word. And we can ask, what is the quality here? Again, it's hard to put these things into words, even though it is about the word. Of course, on Earth, we think of Mars as having a warlike aggressiveness. Yet in the spiritual world, Steiner tells us that it's different. He describes how in the 17th century, the Buddha accomplished a kind of sacrifice for Mars. It is his mission now to exercise a pacifying influence there in order that his powers of peace and empathy might stream into the strength prevailing in the Mars beings, to gradually initiate the process of ascending evolution for this planet. So now every time we pass through this planet in our life between death and rebirth, we can receive these blessings from the Buddha. And we can ask ourselves now, how can we imagine cultivating the positive qualities of Mars, right? This idea of initiative, right? Enthusiasm, the will to action, the power of the protective warrior, guarding peace and progress, right? This is something to contemplate for Mars. And if we add those kinds of positive qualities to this Mars sphere, even on Earth, we can make a difference and counteract those more aggressive, destructive forces. Yeah. And so the soul then progresses further and lives into Jupiter, the sphere of cosmic wisdom. So we get the tone of E. And the gesture is ooh. I could do it up here. Ooh. Maybe we want to give it down. Ooh. So up until now, we still had a bit of a connection to the earth, but when we reach Jupiter, the soul really, it's too far away. We're really not feeling into the earth anymore. The sun, still has limited influence on us. But here it's like the entire universe is working in us through. Saturn describes it as the harmony of the spheres. This is what we're experiencing in the Jupiter. He gives this great description. He talks about, to try to understand, what is this, these transformations, these, we hear these tones and we know that there's a change of vibration. And so he describes this passage from Sun, which is, again, this gateway, through Mars to Jupiter. And he compares it to orchestra music changing into choral music.
Mm. Mm.
That really helps me to think about, like, wow, that's, there's a difference there, and so maybe you want to put on some classical music later and listen to that and think about what that does in your being, to hear that shift. So in this sphere of cosmic wisdom, we receive insights from the divine Sophia. And this is a preview of the Holy Spirit, which is in the higher realms. So Saturn is the sphere of cosmic memory or cosmic order, with the tone of G. Ooh. So it's in this next sphere that we can transmute the forces acquired, through the knowledge of spiritual science, into forces that create our next physical constitution. Right? So that in our coming life, we have a natural inclination toward the spiritual. So the Saturn sphere is where we work with these powerful spiritual beings to create the kind of body we're going to have next time. And again, he gives us only slight indications for these higher spheres. And then when we get beyond Saturn, a kind of spiritual sleep sets in. So, just like with earthly rest, we sleep to heal tiredness and to gather new forces. So from a spiritual point of view, from now on, our heightened consciousness is dimmed, which makes it possible to undergo still more experiences of transformation. We're interpenetrated by all the star colonies of the spiritual beings in cosmic space, so that we can learn to know them and ourselves as human beings in truth. So at this point in the journey, after having inscribed ourselves in each one of the spheres, we arrive in what is called Upper Devachan. And then we can, we see each other as this karmic group, right? We're there in the zodiac, right? We're mirroring these zodiac gestures. And if we had a eurythmist here, we would go through all of those, and we really don't have time, but it's a beautiful thing to do. Steiner tells us that to really understand karma, we have to renew our wisdom with the stars, and eurythmy is a great way to do that. Maybe we'll try to put that in as an artistic exercise down the line, because it's my favorite thing to do. And then we experience what is called the cosmic midnight hour, which signals us to begin our journey back to rebirth. And we pass once again through the planetary spheres, but this time in reverse order, starting with Saturn. And yes, we have to pick up all the baggage that we left behind, right? All the karma that we were not able to purify. We pick it up, we carry it back into our next life until those lessons are learned. And yet, these parts of ourselves still remain written in the stars, inscribed there in the Akashic record that we've heard so much about, right? Which is always working out of the spiritual worlds onto the earth to help us shape our destiny, right? This is how our karma is prepared. So yeah, I don't know, folks out there, have you gotten your astrological chart done, right? the position of the planets relative to the fixed stars. It gives us some indication of our destiny, of the work we've come to do, of our karma, right? So this is really the real reason why the planetary patterns have an effect on human nature. And we were talking about this eclipse that we're going to be experiencing this evening. You'll probably be asleep, but before you go to bed, you can think about that. Like, okay, how can I, in my dream life, in my time in the spiritual world, hold the light during this eclipse? And again, yeah, Steiner really describes the gods as doing eurythmy, right? And that's what actually creates the human being. So maybe before we go to bed, we might do some hygienic eurythmy or something to help with this process. Yeah, this amazing new art form of movement. And it's connecting us to these primal gestures of the stars that we are made out of, right? We carry within us the whole universe, right? So, I mean, what could give us greater strength for our duties in life than the knowledge that we bear within us the forces pouring in from the work that we did with those great spiritual beings in our life between death and rebirth. And so that's how we prepare ourselves, and if we think about it now in our lives, we can be more conscious in that time, right? I'm always saying, why wait? Why should we wait, until we die? We can do the reckoning now. We can really begin to the work of digesting these insights right now, and consider what are the effects of our thoughts, words, and deeds are. So yeah, we share so much with the people in our lives, and yes, sometimes it's not beautiful. Sometimes we have relationships that karma brings us that we need to heal, and that's important. And when somebody dies and we had a hard relationship, we weren't able to maybe work it through in this life, we can still do that work. We can still work with them. And sometimes they're actually more able to do it when they're not in the body than when they were stuck in their habit life. So that gives us an opportunity. And you know what? Can we really learn to live with this idea that death is our friend, right? We don't have to be afraid. Death, this idea we were talking about earlier of the going into the dark forces of the year, etc. We can make this time where we can reveal ourselves. We can think of death as a confidant, helping us know the truth, helping us know when it's healthy to have some boundaries, when it's important to say no, right? To cut away what does not serve, to let something die that needs to die. That's an important lesson to learn in life. This kind of discernment, that's the inner work that allows us to know ourselves, right? This is the great work, which carves out a space within us where our true light can really begin to shine. This work is necessary if we are to prepare a space for the birth of our higher selves. Right? This birth, it takes work, right? Birth, it's a labor, and it can be painful. But we must strive to be conscious enough to seek the answer. The answer is to know thyself, which is always another question, isn't it? So yeah, we carve pumpkins to make pie this time of year. Can we carve out a space within ourselves, prepare a room of one's own, as Virginia Woolf once said, right? How important that is to carve out a space for meditation, for prayer, for quiet contemplation, a time to read to the dead. And this time of year, yeah, it provides many opportunities if we choose to take them up. So yeah, thank you, friends. This time of Michaelmas, All Souls Tide, as we we move into the holidays, it is a time to meditate on our link with our inner selves and with the other side, and to ask questions like, who have I been? Who am I now? And where am I going, right? Who do I want to become? We mentioned when we were talking about All Hallows that, this tradition of dressing up for Halloween really was about, what do you want to dress up to be in the new year, right? So who do we want to become? And what would it be like to take up this kind of a contemplation of these kinds of questions at this time of year? So I'm gonna get rid of this and see if I can figure out the breakout rooms. And let's see. And I would invite you to take those questions. Who maybe, who am I? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to become? Or maybe for you, this little journey that we just took was you were thinking of a particular soul, and maybe you want to think about them and what their experience is right now and share those insights. How's that sound? Does that sound like a job to take on? All right. Well, I'm gonna send you off to have some conversation, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you, friends.
This is truly a blessing to gather like this. Thank you for all that you are bringing to us. It's funny when you were talking about the spiritual world, when we ascend each night into the spiritual world. There's a beautiful book called The Angels. Everyone should just memorize this book because it really gives you this structural, magnificent artwork of the spiritual world and how we can interact with them, and many other things as well. But whatever we say or do during the day, whatever we say will be brought to before our archangels every night. So whatever we can think in a positive way, whatever we do will go to the archive. So nothing is ever wasted. So whatever good thought or good word or good action or good deed, we can carry that into the spiritual world. And so whatever we have to lay and sacrifice before the feet of these hierarchies, of these divine beings, in a conscious way, is never wasted. So we are creating what's happening in the spiritual world here on earth. So I was able to share something really beautiful about my mother, and the moment where I laid aside my own self-interest and brought compassion forward into a moment that she was developing dementia. And I felt the presence of Christ, and I put my arm around her, and something inside of her released her anger and anxiety. And the next 4 years, as she descended into her dementia, she had peace, tranquility, and happiness. And I really truly believe it was that moment where something greater was allowed to be. So this has been really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. It's so important. We have to realize that, when we're not paying attention to that, when we're not bringing those Christ forces, even if it's just an unconscious thing, that creates the world too. So I think there's a lot of unconsciousness creating the world right now, and that's why we're in such an imbalance. And when we bring this intention, when we bring this beauty, when we bring the impulse of the Christ into our conversations, into our relationships, into our thinking, feeling, and willing, then a change occurs. And what a beautiful example of that. Thank you. Beautiful. Karen?
We had a beautiful sharing in our group. We talked, the two other women shared about and I have this too as well, with our challenges with alcoholism and in our families. But I wanted to say that I'm really grateful for this group because I come from Canada and I actually have sought out the Anthroposophical Society of America for this very type of experience. I have been involved with anthroposophy now for over 20 years. And it really took me going to New Zealand to be able to have weekly conversations with anthroposophists. I don't have contact with people on a regular basis. And so I'm just saying, the question was, who am I? The question for me is, I'm really seeking ways to connect with people on these very questions, these very images, these very teachings that you're sharing here, Hazel. And so if anybody wants to welcome me into their learning group, I would be very happy to be part of that. So I'm just saying that it's becoming very clear to me that that's what I'm seeking.
Well, you know, there are a lot of people doing study groups and such online. So in Chicago here, we have a Wednesday study group. We just started working with pastoral medicine. So that's Wednesdays at 9:30 to 11 Chicago time, if you're interested in that. Yeah. I know some folks want to run off to the 6B, but I'm going to call on Sandra, and I'm perfectly fine to stay later if people want. Go ahead, Sandra.
Well, I'm going to run off to the 6B soon. Just really quickly, there on the cosmic journey, I just wanted to add from the singing, anthroposophic singing therapy, that Frau Verbeck saw that Umkreis, that celestial sphere around the earth of the constellations and the zodiac, as expressed by the sound of the NG, which is a healing sound for the voice and for the whole being. And that's why her school became an anthroposophic singing school, because it could develop the whole human being. And that NG sound is a real key element of that.
Can you give us an example of that sound?
Yeah, just in the word sing, every time you say this, the ing, working, singing, growing, and the tongue goes to the back and it cuts the sound stream off and directs to the head.
Nice.
Instead of to the throat projection. It becomes a bell of ringing sound around you, like you access the etheric sound centers of your being. That's the short 20-second version. And the other piece with the alcoholism, how that connects, is this idea of the void and how that's part of the spiritual journey. And in anthroposophy, we learn that in the class lessons really go into. That is part of the journey. And people don't have a context for that experience. And many people are crossing the threshold in the body now without any context, and they're freaking out. And that's why we have so much drug abuse and opioid stuff and all that other stuff, because it's overwhelming and they don't have a context. And part of, I think, our mission as a society, frankly, is to share our knowledge from the class lessons somehow with a wider audience so that the world has a context for that experience. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a normal part of the spiritual.
Thank you. I totally agree with that. Yeah, and I think it's important. You know, we started to try to do that at the conference, for building the Temple of the Heart, to talk about the sections, to talk about the school, make it known to people that this is accessible. It's not some, hidden away thing that, it's something we need to work with.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
Thank you, guys. It was wonderful. Such a beautiful change to the day.
Thank you, friends. Well, it is 11, unless we have somebody else who would like to speak. I'm going to say thank you, and we won't see you next week, but it'll be December when we come back, and we will start to talk about Advent and give a little picture of the Holy Nights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, did you want to say something before we go? Yeah. Go ahead.
So unmute myself.
Yeah.
What I'm coming across is that I'm finding so many beautiful souls that we're meeting with. And I would like to be interested in maybe doing Zoom calls in a group setting where anyone who would really like to get together and talk, and we can set a tone for the meeting, a direction or something like that, we should really think about that, because eventually, Hazel, we will be with you in this particular group, but this is really so enriching. I would love to learn, or, to expound on this. I just don't wish to see it evaporate
Good.
after this is over with. So I could even give my Gmail. If anybody else has an interest in, maybe we could form something when this is over
Perfect. I
going
love-
forward. Is that for all those interested? Everyone's got so much that's so valuable to share. We should build on it.
Yeah, I do believe I have an email list with everybody's emails too. So maybe we could send something out, and then everybody will have each other's emails if that works for people.
That's fine with me.
Maybe
Yeah.
next time I'll announce that and make sure it's okay for everybody to share there.
Or just make it voluntary. Anybody who wants to just send it, to you, and then
Good.
I can, what I'll do, I'll just publish mine right now. It's real,
already, yeah.
yeah. Okay.
me too.
So yeah, because that would really be really wonderful. Boy, international. That's everybody from all over the place. So
Yeah.
it's really, it's awesome. And thank you, Hazel. You are gold.
And
you.
thanks, Karen, for
Thank you.
your impulse on that too.
Yeah, very much. And Sandra, you could contact me. We actually have a group right now working with the class lessons as a study group, working with Sergei Prokofiev's book.
Oh, nice.
If you're interested in that, we could talk about that as well.
Definitely.
Good. All right, friends, blessings to all. Give thanks in every way and every day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many blessings. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yes.